Slurpty diddly, amen, amen, and amen, my G's. And today we're gonna do a little bit of work on the amen break. So, did you know? You'd probably know, but jungle music, drum and bass, a lot of it really can all be traced back to this wonderful track from the Winstons called Amen Brother. And if you haven't heard the whole track, I suggest you go and listen to it. I'm not going to play anything too long because YouTube will probably flag it. But anyway, in this popular old school funk track, there is a little moment in the track where we have just the amen break by itself, which sounds a bit like this over here. And isn't that wonderful? And so what I've done today is I've created a little loop using that original amen break, and I want to show you how I would process the original amen break from this sort of low quality audio file that I've got, how I would beef that up into a fatter sounding amen break if I had to. Really, you know, there's already so many amen breaks that have been processed and that are out there, and some of them already sound like excellent, and the one I've made might not be as good as some of those, you know, but this would be my way, how I would process the original amen break to make it fatter. And so I've basically just chopped out the break from the track, so I'm doing it all properly from the beginning, you know. And so if you want, we can loop that and I can bob my head and we can do a whole 10 minutes of that. That would be fun as well. But if you want to learn a little bit about how I would process it, let's continue. So the first thing, obviously, is to note, you know, it's not the same tempo as drum and bass. So the first thing was to actually speed up the amen break. And so what I first did then, if I'm going to save the whole result till the end, actually. So we'll turn off all the other stuff. And let's make sure I turn everything off here as well. Sorry, bear with me. Right, so the amen break, once it's been put into time, sounds like this. Okay, but how did I get it in time? Obviously, depends what DAW you're using, but on Logic, which is, you know, my one. Well, I didn't make it, but it's the one that I use. Slicing is a mode on the flex option. So I just hit my flex button. I went to slicing because it will just it will move the slices, just it won't like pitch them around, do some kind of weird effect. It just like chops it and moves it, you know. Because we're speeding it up, it makes all the individual, you know, sliced audio files like smaller, bigger, smaller. Basically, if you're like speeding things up, you're not going to have this problem where, you know, if you had the slice mode on and when you were slowing it down, there'd be gaps between the audio files, you know. But if you're speeding it up, you know, it's the little file before is always going to go into the next one without a gap. So like when you're speeding stuff up, the slicing mode can be good, and the slicing mode is good for like drums essentially. But the whole idea with the slicing mode is it's not going to change the sound really, you know. So just to get it in time, I know I've obviously looped it. I've cut where the first kick is, and then I've cut where after 4 bars the next kick would be. So I've cut it first, yeah, and then re-stretched it down, you know, to fit into 4 bars. Okay, and then just to keep it natural, I've tried to avoid like doing, you know, moving every single transient. So I just pick a few key transients, like sort of like 3 or 4 or something. So for example, that kick again there, that's like the kick on the downbeat on the bar 2. I've moved that, you know, to be directly on the grid, and so I'll just take a couple of the key parts of the break, like the downbeat kicks, and just put them on the grid, you know, and then all the stuff in between can be slightly off, and that's going to be the realistic part of the amen break, still keeping in that realistic playing. But I'm just like anchoring the main kicks to the grid so that it just sort of, yeah, it won't like be too out of time, you know. that's how I got the balance between the realistic amen groove, but anchoring little bits of it to the grid still, just like in a couple of places. So now we've got to beef it up, right? So first I'm going to like process the actual file, and then I'm going to add a stereo convolution layer. And this is wonderful. Oh, I'm really enjoying coffee with milk again, because I had a little diet from milk and was just drinking black coffee. I think my sort of routine now is black coffee during the week, Monday to Friday, and coffee with milk on the weekends as a little treat. Yeah, anyway, so first I'm going to beef up the actual file. I could chop out the kicks and snares and do it on separate channels and treat them all differently. But in this demonstration, I just want to like keep it simple. And how would I process like only the break and just have the break doing all of the work? So the first thing to notice, the kick's just like super lacking in energy and power. You know, often I would like add a new kick underneath, like a fresh sine wave kind of synthetic kick underneath. But in this like I said, I'm sort of just trying to remaster just the actual break. So in that case, I'm just going to try and get a bit more oomph by boosting the kick in a nice area. So I want to just boost that lowest fundamental, which is around 64 hertz. Okay, I'm going to leave all the low end in the break for this, because I want it to be as like bass, almost quite bassy as well, you know, because I'll tell you why later. But here I'm just sort of trying to pick out this sort of snare part. Just a couple of little boosts in the low end to begin with, just try and give it a bit more power. But I've not gone too heavy with it, you know, because the more heavy you go with the EQ, you're going to lose a bit of sound quality. So it's just a bit of a balance. All right. So I've got to get more volume in. I know I can get a lot in the high end. So the next thing I added was the SDRR, which is a Klanghelm device. And I've just boosted the treble a bit and mixed it in, really. And that just gives it a slight extra treble boost. You can do that with many other plugins. I just kind of like the way that you boost the treble with that one. I like the sort of color of it. So, but you don't have to use that one, you know. Then I'm doing transient shaping, and I hate to boost the attack on drums, like especially any like modern drum samples. They're already quite punchy always, you know. But this one, because it's like an old file and it just doesn't have enough like weight to the transients yet, you know, so I've decided to boost them, but it's only up at 11%. But it does make a big difference, you know. The problem is when you go too high, although the kicks and snares sound pretty good, like you kind of get the hats become too clicky almost, you know, so about 11%. So I got kind of like a nice little extra push on the like punch of the kick and the snare like that, you know. But I've taken the sustain down a tiny bit. If I go too much, I'll lose like all the volume pretty much, you know. But a little bit will just make it slightly tighter sounding, okay. Everything I'm doing here is in stages, and it's all very subtle, one thing at a time, because it is quite a precious process. So I don't often use the mastering compressor on any sound during my productions. I only really ever save this plugin for when I do my mastering. But I love this one because it adds a really nice, powerful low-end signal, and it's quite rare for a plugin to do that well. So here I've just picked out the drums preset. There's a few on there. I just cycled through the drum ones. This plugin has a good way of sort of the preset designs tend to work pretty well to what they actually say they're supposed to work well on. So, you know, the drums folder, the drums presets on the drums, you've only got sort of 5 or something, but they all work pretty nicely. And the discrete iron one just sounded the best on the Amen. And so I've just used that and essentially then just mixed it in here because you have a parallel mix. We've gone about 74%, and that really elevates the whole thing from the bottom upwards. You know, it elevates things from right at the low end and then all the way up. You know, so it doesn't it brings up your low end with everything together. So that's why that one's really good. Okay, so that's that part done. Then, as I said, doing things just in stages, how I think it needs to be treated. I've just taken the sustain down a little bit more again now to try and just tighten it up a little bit more. And that makes a nice difference because it kind of gives you a bit more emphasis on the punchiness again with the kicks and snares, you know, because the kind of rest of the parts are just taken down slightly in volume. So it's just more priority for the punchy part of the break again, but just, you know, done very subtly. So now it's already sounding much fatter than it was back here, you know. And faster, obviously. But yeah, next then, this is where I start doing a bit of mid-side EQing. As I mentioned on yesterday's video, the only time I really often use this technique is to just cut the low end a bit and just try to clear out a bit of extra space in the break if I can. And it does lift it up. It does lift the break up quite a lot, cutting that out. I was pretty happy around there for the actual file because again, you know, everything I've done has been a subtle tweak, and I don't want to over process either, you know, because it will destroy it at some point. So I'm pretty happy with how I got that. And then next is the joyous part where I add in a convolution layer to really fatten it up. So with this now together, I've really made it big and beasty and stereo. So all I've done is I've copied over, I've bounced that one out onto a new channel, so I've got two versions. All right, and then on this one, I've done convolution reverb 100%. It has to be 100%, otherwise you'll sort of be phasing. You'll have two dry signals, so it's got to be 100%. And it's the white blur 50 milliseconds, which I always rave about because it's just like really tight and works on most sounds, and just a tight little room sound. And that essentially then makes it sure that it's all convolution, right? But you've got to like blend it together with the bass. Sorry, not the bass, with the original break. And to get it to blend together even better is a way you can do that is to actually change the harmonics even before you go into the convolution a bit. So there's many ways to do that. Comb filter, you could do some tape, you could like any kind of distortion, any creative plugin that messes with the harmonics. But in this case, I've used the formant filter. And it changes the harmonics so much in the actual sample. If I switch it on again here. If I move this around. I have left the cue right at the bottom, so it's subtle. But if you were to turn that up. Find a part where you change the sort of resonance on the sample. I bring the cue down so it's like a bit subtle, but that is it's dramatically changed the kind of resonant kind of frequencies in the sound, and so that means that when I've blended it back in with the original, then it kind of stacks on top in a fatter way because the frequency content's like been altered, so it'll like kind of, you know, like a puzzle piece fit together and create a new image that's like bigger. So that's the point of doing that. Amen, amen, and amen. And next up then, with the convolution, I don't really, with layering, I always take out enough low end, you know, because the more you try to layer up low end on top of low end, the more, you know, struggle you have with the mix down then. So I'm taking out a fair bit on the convolution layer up to 300 here, and then I've gone over it once more to do another softer curve because I like to, you know, ease out my EQs like I'm building a, you know, like what's the word when you like sculpting a car bonnet for like an old classic Porsche or something, you know, you've got to get that shape just right, you know? I've got a family friend who restores classic cars. That's why I use that analogy, because it's always fascinating to see all these classic cars in his workshop and the way he like spends like months like sculpting the body of the car so it's like perfect to how it should look, you know. So that's how I always think about EQing, like just really taking it slowly with soft kind of adjustments always, and it's worth it in the end because you get a higher quality finish. So last up, I've done a little transient shaper on that, just because, again, you know, transient shaping, like EQing, is a thing you can just never do enough of, because you can constantly, you know, shape the dynamic of it as well. So again, just tightening it up there and bringing a bit of the transients off, because it's a layer that needs to have a bit less than the original. So kind of taking a bit of both the beginning and the end out. And then I'll just turn it down, you know, mix it down in volume, and playing it with the original, you know. That's off, obviously. And we just settle on a kind of point where it feels like you've boosted the stereo, but you've not like overly done it, you know, so you can hear the effect, but it's kind of like, feels like it's one, you know, so that's the idea. So probably here about -7 or -5 was cool. Yeah, something like that. And that's it then for the break. I've put that into a little group and just clipped it, because if it wasn't, if I put them into a group and they weren't clipped, they're kind of going a bit into the red. So I'm just going to clip that actual group. And then, like I kind of often do, just a side cut, just again in case. You've got the convolution in there. There's not really much down there, but just for the sake of it, I've actually put a little side cut first, and then I've actually done a little boost like in the treble. So both of them together, not only did they kind of lack a little bit in that area, like it could have had a little bit more treble push, but also the fact that I've EQ'd it on the group together, that will, like, as a byproduct, kind of gel the two layers together a little bit more as well, you know, just because I'm doing something on them both together. So that EQ plus this one also gels them together a bit, you know. And I don't need to go ahead and compress it or something, you know, because I've already set the dynamics up how I like them, you know. So let's go ahead and add in some extra sounds now. So I've got an 808 bass sample that I just found, and I've thrown this in as well in the mix. And I've basically sort of like just picked out the main kicks and then like had the bass hitting like when the kicks hit, sort of following along with the kick pattern. So it kind of, yeah, fits with the funk a little bit, like kind of in a smart way. So just following the bass, you know, copying sort of what the kick rhythm is. Obviously you don't have to do that, but what I've done now is something I noticed on as I was at a lesson with a student, Anthony, a little while ago, and we were talking about Amen tracks and playing through some of his favourite tunes. Yeah, I noticed this sort of effect on some old school Amen heavy tracks where the Amen was sort of always taking like a big priority in the mix, and the sort of the bass would sort of come down quite a lot when the Amen was like at full force. So I thought I'd slap on a compressor onto the bass and sidechain it from the break quite heavily. So the Amen always kind of has the dominance, you know, and it controls like the bass a bit, and it gives the bass, it just ducks the bass down, you know, in those moments where the Amen gets loud. And I've ducked it down quite a lot, so I just re-upped the output gain again. Just 1 dB, but now together they sound quite nice. Just in this case, I wanted to like give the Amen all the priority, like in the have that still be sort of at the forefront, you know. I quickly just added a little pad in the high end as well from the free Sound Paint library. I just put this on the Ambience Adastra folder, which is great. The machine preset here. which sounds on its own like this. Just played 2 notes in, and just EQ'd out the low end. Again, I've put a compressor on from the Amen, so the Amen sort of always takes the lead. And then I've just reduced the width of the pad because it was super, super wide. But that's how cool is that? That's how we've added then like a bit of a darker jungly D&B feeling with like a bit of an eerie pad, an 808 bass, and just the processed break, and it's just those 3 elements, you know, and that's a cool groove without anything else, you know. So we've gone all the way from this to this. So how cool is that? I'm really happy with the way that one turned out. There's many ways you could process the Amen break, or you could just get a different sample that's already been done for you. But just as a fun video today, I wanted to see if I can have a go at trying to make the old school Amen break as like high quality sounding as I could, and what sort of elements I'd use with it to create like a dark jungly kind of vibe. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little video today. Yes, I also have started a new little video series on my Patreon, which is called Discord Dynasties, and it's basically where I'm going to be producing a whole track from start to finish. There's already a few videos there. I'm doing it like at one little stage at a time, so you'll get to see the inner workings of my brain when I'm creating something new, which I've never done that before. I've never shared like every thought and every process that goes into making a new track, and the pressure is really on because I've got to make a really good one, you know. So if you want to see what I'm doing, head over to Patreon, and you can find that video series there as like an exclusive. And in that series I'll be sharing some more tips that I don't always share on YouTube, because it's sort of, you know, behind a paywall, so the content is of a slightly higher quality when it comes to like sharing the most, like, yeah, just like the best composition and mix down advice that I can personally come up with, you know. So if you want to check that out, highly recommend. Either way, my G's, I hope this video has been enlightening today, and I will be catching up with you guys for another tutorial tomorrow. Peace out.